The Galactic Council station hung in the void like a jewel made of metal and light. It orbited a star that belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. 300 different species called this place the center of civilized space. For 15 years, humanity had been trying to become part of that civilization. Ambassador Lisa Brennan stood in the waiting chamber outside the Grand Council Hall. Her dark blue uniform was pressed to perfection. Every button gleamed, every crease was sharp. She had checked her appearance 17 times that morning. The other human diplomats with her were just as nervous. They all knew what today meant. Commander Jake Morrison watched the station from the bridge of the ESS Voyager. His ship floated 3,000 kilometers from the massive structure. 6 other human vessels waited with him. They were good ships, but nothing compared to what he saw around them. Alien vessels of incredible size and strange design filled the space around the station. Some looked like living creatures. Others were geometric impossibilities that hurt to look at for too long. The human ships looked plain and simple by comparison. Jake drummed his fingers on the arm of his command chair. His crew was silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Today, the Council would vote on humanity's application for full membership. 15 years of tests and trials and changes. 15 years of proving themselves worthy. Today it would finally end. Inside the station, Lisa heard the doors open. A tall, thin alien with silver skin gestured for her to enter. She recognized him as a Yeltran assistant to one of the senior council members. He said nothing as she walked past. The Grand Council Hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high it seemed to fade into darkness. Seats rose in circular tiers around a central platform. Hundreds of aliens sat in those seats. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had skin that shifted colors. Some didn't have skin at all. Lisa walked to the center platform. Her footsteps echoed. She could feel thousands of eyes on her. Not all of them were eyes in the human sense, but she felt watched all the same. She stopped at the designated spot and waited. The High Arbiter of the Zethran people rose from the highest seat. He was massive with gray chitinous armor covering his body. His voice boomed through the hall without need for amplification. The Council has reviewed humanity's application for full membership. We have studied your species for 15 standard cycles. We have observed your worlds and your people. We have tested your technology and your culture. We have given you guidance on how to meet our standards. The High Arbiter paused, his many eyes fixed on Lisa. After careful consideration and lengthy debate, the Council has reached a decision. Lisa felt her heart pound. This was it. All those years of work, all those compromises and changes. Earth had rewritten laws to satisfy Council requirements. They had limited their military to appear less threatening. They had changed their education system to focus more on cooperation and less on competition. They had done everything asked of them. The Council has decided to extend humanity's probationary status for an additional 10 standard cycles. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Around the hall, some aliens nodded in approval. Others showed no reaction at all. The High Arbiter continued speaking. Humanity has made progress, but you remain too unpredictable. Your species shows excessive aggression in your entertainment. Your competitive nature creates instability. Your emotions are not sufficiently controlled. We believe another decade of guidance will help you reach the level of civilization required for full membership. Lisa stood frozen. She had prepared 2 speeches, one for acceptance and one for rejection. Neither seemed appropriate now. This wasn't rejection exactly. It was another delay, another decade of being treated as children who needed supervision. She opened her mouth to respond, but the High Arbiter raised a hand. The decision is final. You may return to your vessel. We will transmit the updated requirements for your next evaluation period. The Vorlan Council head rose from his seat. He was shorter than the Zethran, but his presence was equally commanding. His smooth blue skin reflected the light. We do this for your benefit, Ambassador. Young species often struggle to understand the responsibilities that come with Council membership. We are protecting you from your own nature. Take this time to grow. Learn to be more like the civilized species around you. Lisa wanted to scream. She wanted to demand answers. She wanted to ask what gave them the right to judge humanity by standards humanity never agreed to. Instead, she bowed slightly as protocol demanded. Thank you, Honored Council. Earth will consider your guidance. Her voice was steady, but inside she felt something crack. Jake Morrison received the message before Lisa even left the station. The words appeared on his screen, cold and impersonal. Application denied. Probationary status extended. Return to Earth. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Around him, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Lieutenant Kevin Ross at the navigation station shook his head slowly. Ensign Maria Santos at communications had tears in her eyes. Jake opened the ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the commander. The council has decided to extend our probationary period. We're going home. He kept his voice neutral, but everyone could hear the disappointment underneath. The other human ships in the fleet received the same message. One by one, they began moving away from the station. The alien vessels around them paid no attention. To them, this was just another minor administrative matter. Lisa returned to the Voyager 3 hours later. She went straight to her quarters and sat in the dark. Jake found her there an hour after that. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat in the chair across from her and waited. Finally, Lisa spoke. We did everything they asked. Everything. We changed laws. We changed our culture. We made ourselves smaller and quieter and less human. And it still wasn't enough. Jake nodded. I know, Lisa looked at him. Her eyes were red. What do we tell Earth? What do we tell the colonies? What do we tell the millions of people who believed this time would be different? Jake didn't have an answer. The ship hummed around them as it began the long journey home. Outside the windows, the stars looked the same as they always had. Beautiful and distant and completely indifferent to human disappointment. The trip back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Lisa wrote her report 17 different ways. None of them felt right. How do you tell an entire species that they aren't good enough? How do you explain that their best efforts fell short of standards set by beings who would never see them as equals? She finally settled on a simple factual account. No emotion. No editorializing. Just the facts. Jake spent the journey thinking about the last 15 years. He had been a young officer when humanity first made contact with the Galactic Council. He remembered the excitement, the hope. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe. There were thousands of other intelligent species out there. Surely they would welcome humans as brothers and sisters among the stars. But it hadn't worked that way. The council had been polite but distant. They spoke of standards and requirements. They treated humanity like a child asking to sit at the adult table. And humanity had tried so hard to earn that seat. Earth had bent over backward to meet every requirement. They had passed tests on technology. They had demonstrated peaceful intentions. They had signed treaties limiting their expansion. They had even agreed to let council observers live on Earth to monitor human development. All of it in pursuit of acceptance from beings who seemed to find new reasons to say no every time humanity got close to yes. When Earth came into view, Lisa felt relief mixed with dread. Relief to be home. Dread at what came next. The Voyager and its escort ships entered orbit. Messages of welcome came from the surface, but they felt hollow. Everyone already knew the news. It had traveled faster than the ships. Jake stood beside Lisa at the window looking down at their home world. It's a beautiful planet, he said. Lisa nodded. We shouldn't have to apologize for being human. Jake looked at her surprised. That was the first time he had heard her say anything like that. Say that again, he said. Lisa turned to face him. We shouldn't have to apologize for being human. We shouldn't have to make ourselves less to satisfy beings who will never be satisfied. We shouldn't have to beg for approval from a council that treats us like we're barely civilized. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. That's what you should tell Earth. Lisa shook her head. I can't say that. It would be the end of my career. Jake shrugged. Maybe it's time someone said it anyway. They stood in silence for a long moment. Below them, Earth turned slowly in the sunlight. Billions of humans going about their lives, working and loving and dreaming and fighting, being human in all the messy, complicated ways that made the council so uncomfortable. Lisa made a decision then, though she didn't fully realize it yet. Something had shifted inside her during that long journey home. A seed of rebellion had been planted. It would take time to grow, but grow it would. She wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, but the thought was there. Maybe humanity didn't need the council's approval. Maybe they never had. The news hit Earth like a wave. Every screen showed the same message. Humanity's application had been denied again. Another 10 years of probationary status. Another decade of proving themselves worthy. The reaction was not what anyone expected. President Helen Grant sat in her office in Geneva reading the reports. Protests had erupted in dozens of cities. Not violent protests, but something more dangerous. People were gathering in public spaces and simply talking. They were asking questions that had been whispered before but never said out loud. Why do we keep begging? Why do we change ourselves for them? What have they ever done to earn our respect? The Global Assembly convened 2 days after the Voyager returned. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered in the Great Hall. Helen had prepared a speech about patience and perseverance. She was going to announce new cultural reforms to satisfy the Council's latest requirements. She was going to ask Earth to try harder. But when she looked out at the assembled representatives, she saw something in their faces that made her pause. Ambassador Lisa Brennan sat in the gallery watching. She had been asked to attend to provide her first-hand account of the Council proceedings. Jake Morrison sat beside her in his dress uniform. They both felt the tension in the room. Something was different. Something had changed in the collective mood of humanity. Helen began her prepared speech. The Galactic Council has extended our probationary period. This is disappointing but not unexpected. We must continue to work toward meeting their standards. We must show them that humanity can be responsible members of the galactic community. As she spoke, she could see representatives shifting in their seats. Some were shaking their heads. Others were whispering to their neighbors. Then a young man stood up. His name was Alex Carter, and he was a junior diplomat from the North American Union. He was not scheduled to speak. Protocol dictated that he should wait to be recognized, but he stood anyway, and his voice carried across the hall. "Madam President, I must speak." Helen paused, surprised. The room fell silent. Alex took a breath. "I have been a diplomat for 5 years. I have worked on the Council application. I have helped draft compliance reports. I have done everything in my power to help humanity gain membership. But I cannot stay silent anymore." Helen gestured for him to continue, though her expression was uncertain. Alex looked around the room. "We are changing ourselves for beings who will never accept us. We have rewritten our laws. We have limited our freedoms. We have made ourselves smaller and quieter and less human. And for what? So they can tell us we need to do more. So they can move the goal line further away. So they can keep us begging for scraps of approval." Some representatives began to nod. Others looked shocked. Alex continued, his voice growing stronger. "I have read the Council's requirements. Do you know what they want from us? They want us to eliminate competitive sports because competition is too aggressive. They want us to stop making action movies because they promote violence. They want us to teach our children that ambition is a character flaw. They want us to be ashamed of being human." Lisa found herself leaning forward. She had thought these same things but never dared say them. Alex was saying what so many felt but feared to express. The young diplomat pointed at the screen behind Helen, where the Council's message was still displayed. "They call us unpredictable. They call us emotional. They call us aggressive. But what they really mean is we are not like them. We do not fit their idea of what a civilized species should be, and instead of celebrating our differences, we are trying to erase them." Jake whispered to Lisa. "He's right." Lisa nodded slowly. She had spent 15 years of her career trying to make humanity acceptable to the Council. She had defended their decisions. She had explained their requirements. She had believed that membership was worth the cost. But sitting there listening to Alex, she realized something. The cost was too high. Alex's voice filled the hall. "I move that we withdraw humanity's application for Council membership. I move that we stop seeking approval from beings who do not respect us. I move that we forge our own path among the stars." The hall erupted. Some representatives shouted in agreement. Others called for order. Helen stood at her podium, stunned into silence. The debate lasted for hours. Representative after representative stood to speak. Some argued that humanity needed the Council for protection and trade. Others argued that humanity had survived for thousands of years without alien approval and could continue to do so. Some said withdrawal would be seen as an insult. Others said continuing to beg was the real insult. Lisa watched it all unfold. She saw career diplomats who had spent decades pursuing Council membership stand up and support withdrawal. She saw military officers argue for independence. She saw scientists talk about how Council regulations had limited human research and innovation. She saw the mood of the room shift from debate to consensus. Helen Grant listened to it all. She had been president for 8 years. She had made Council membership her primary goal. She had believed it was humanity's destiny to join the galactic community, but as she listened to her people speak, she realized they were telling her something important. They were tired of asking permission. They were tired of being judged. They were tired of changing themselves to fit someone else's standards. When the debate finally ended, Helen stood again. The hall grew quiet. She looked at her prepared speech still sitting on the podium. She picked it up and very deliberately tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed in the silence. Then she spoke without notes. I have heard you. I have heard the voice of humanity, and it speaks clearly. We are done begging. We are done seeking approval from those who will never give it freely. We are done making ourselves smaller to fit into someone else's idea of civilization. The hall remained silent, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Helen continued. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws its application for Galactic Council membership. We will no longer participate in their probationary system. We will no longer accept their observers on our worlds. We will no longer limit our growth and exploration to satisfy their requirements. We will forge our own path among the stars. She paused, letting her words sink in. This does not mean we seek conflict with the Council. We will maintain diplomatic relations. We will honor existing treaties, but we will do so as equals, not as supplicants. We will trade with those who wish to trade fairly. We will ally with those who respect us. And we will build our own future according to our own values. The hall erupted in applause. Not everyone was applauding. Some representatives looked worried. Some looked angry. But the majority were on their feet cheering. Lisa found herself standing too. Beside her, Jake was smiling wider than she had ever seen. They had just witnessed history. The news spread across Earth and the colonies within hours. The reaction was overwhelming. In city after city, people gathered to celebrate, not because they hated the Council, but because they were finally free to be themselves. Artists painted murals celebrating human culture. Musicians wrote songs about independence. Writers penned essays about dignity and self-respect. Lisa returned to her apartment that evening exhausted, but feeling lighter than she had in years. She poured herself a drink and stood at her window looking out over Geneva. Her communication console was flooded with messages, some from fellow diplomats congratulating her, some from council members demanding explanations. She ignored them all. Jake called her an hour later. His face on the screen showed a mix of excitement and disbelief. Did that really just happen, he asked. Lisa laughed. It really did. Jake shook his head. What do we do now? Lisa smiled. Now we build our own future. No more asking permission. No more begging for approval. We go out into the galaxy on our own terms. The next morning, President Grant addressed the entire human population. Her speech was broadcast to every world and station and ship. She spoke simply and directly. Yesterday, we stopped asking others to validate our existence. Today, we begin building the future we want, not the future someone else thinks we should have. We will explore. We will grow. We will reach for the stars, not because some council granted us permission, but because we are human, and reaching for the stars is what we do. She outlined plans for expanded exploration programs. New colony ships would be built. Military restrictions would be lifted. Scientific research that had been limited by council regulations would resume. Earth would reach out to other species not as a probationary member seeking approval, but as an independent civilization. Seeking genuine partnerships, Lisa was named Secretary of Interstellar Affairs the following week. Her first task was to draft messages to every species humanity had encountered. The messages were simple. Earth seeks friendship and trade with all who approach us with respect. We offer partnership, not subservience. We seek equals, not masters. Many species would ignore these messages. Some would respond with hostility, but some would respond with interest. Those were the ones that mattered. Jake received new orders as well. The human fleet was being expanded. New ship designs were being developed without the limitations council regulations had imposed. He was promoted to captain and given command of a vessel still under construction. It would be called the Independence. The name seemed appropriate. Across human space, something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just about the council anymore. It was about how humanity saw itself. For 15 years, they had defined themselves by alien standards. They had measured their worth by whether others approved of them. Now they were free to define themselves by their own standards. They were free to be human without apology. The Galactic Council sent messages demanding explanations. President Grant replied with a simple statement. Humanity thanks the Council for their time and attention. We will maintain diplomatic relations, but we are no longer interested in membership. We wish the Council well in their endeavors. The message was polite but firm. There would be no negotiation. The decision was final. Lisa sat in her new office and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope for acceptance or approval. Hope for what humanity could become when they stopped trying to be something they weren't. Hope for a future built on human terms. Hope for partnerships with species who valued them as they were. She smiled and got to work. There was a galaxy out there waiting to meet humanity on equal terms. It was time to introduce themselves properly. 5 years changed everything. Earth transformed in ways no one had predicted. Without council restrictions holding them back, human innovation exploded like a dam breaking. Scientists who had been forced to work within narrow guidelines suddenly had freedom to explore any idea. Engineers who had been told their designs were too aggressive or too ambitious built things that made the galaxy take notice. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHSV Independence and marveled at what humanity had accomplished. His ship was nothing like the old ESS Voyager. It was faster, sleeker, and more powerful than anything the Council had in their fleets. The humans had developed new faster-than-light drives that could cross distances in days that used to take weeks. They had created weapon systems that were both devastating and precise. They had built defensive shields that could withstand hits from the heaviest alien cannons. But the Independence was just one ship. Earth had built hundreds like it. Colony vessels carried thousands of families to new worlds. Research ships pushed into unexplored regions of space. Trade ships moved between human settlements, creating an economic network that grew stronger every month. Humanity was spreading across the stars without asking anyone's permission. Lisa Brennan had become one of the most important people in human space. As Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, she managed Earth's relationships with dozens of alien species. The surprising thing was how many species wanted to talk to humanity now. When Earth had been desperate for council approval, few aliens took them seriously. Now that humans had walked away from the council, everyone wanted to know what they were doing. The first species to reach out had been the Kellans. They were a small industrial people who had been marginalized by the council for decades. Their representative arrived at Earth 3 months after humanity withdrew from the probationary process. His name was Vec, and he stood barely 4 feet tall with gray skin and large dark eyes. He met with Lisa in her office in Geneva. "We have watched what you did," Vec said in heavily accented English. "We have seen how you walked away from those who did not value you. We wish to learn how you found such courage." Lisa had smiled at that. "It wasn't courage," she told him. "It was exhaustion. We got tired of trying to be something we weren't." Vec nodded slowly. "My people understand this feeling. The Council has treated us as servants for 300 years. They take our manufactured goods but give us no voice in decisions. They tell us we are too simple to understand complex politics." That conversation led to the first treaty between Earth and an independent alien species. It was a simple agreement about trade and mutual defense, but it meant something bigger. It meant humanity had found their first real ally. Not someone who tolerated them or looked down on them, but someone who saw them as equals. More species followed. The Preeth were a scientific people who had been frustrated by council restrictions on certain types of research. They reached out to Earth after hearing about human advances in faster-than-light travel. Their scientists met with human researchers, and both sides learned from each other. The knowledge sharing was free and open. No one demanded proprietary rights or council oversight. It was pure scientific cooperation. Within 2 years, Earth had formal relationships with 15 independent species. Some were small, like the Kellans. Others were medium-sized civilizations that had grown tired of council bureaucracy. None of them were major powers, but together, they represented a significant portion of galactic economic activity. Lisa proposed forming something new. She called it the Independent Systems Alliance. The idea was simple. No central authority, no hierarchy. Just free association between sovereign species who agreed to treat each other with respect. Members would trade freely, share technology voluntarily, and defend each other when threatened. Decisions would be made by consensus, not by some high council that thought it knew better than everyone else. The alliance grew faster than anyone expected. Within 3 years, it had 30 member species. Within 4 years, it had 50. Trade between alliance members increased dramatically. Technology advanced rapidly as different species shared their innovations. Cultural exchange programs brought aliens and humans together in ways that felt genuine, rather than forced. Jake Morrison found himself escorting trade convoys through space that used to be considered dangerous. The Independence and ships like it made sure that Alliance vessels could move safely. Pirates and raiders who used to prey on smaller species learned quickly that attacking Alliance ships brought swift consequences. Human military doctrine was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was aggressive, creative, and terrifyingly effective. The Galactic Council watched all of this with growing concern. Their authority had been unquestioned for thousands of years. Species might grumble about Council decisions, but they always complied in the end. The Council controlled access to the most important trade routes. They controlled the flow of advanced technology. They controlled what it meant to be civilized. But now there was an alternative. Species were leaving the Council or maintaining only minimal membership while joining the Alliance. Trade that used to flow through Council-controlled stations was being redirected to Alliance hubs. Technology that the Council had carefully regulated was being shared freely among Alliance members. The Council's power was eroding, and they knew it. The Zethran High Arbiter, who had denied humanity's application 5 years earlier, sent a message to Earth. It was carefully worded and diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. The Council was reconsidering humanity's status. Perhaps an exception could be made to standard procedures. Perhaps humanity could be granted full membership with favorable terms. Perhaps past misunderstandings could be resolved. Lisa read the message and laughed out loud. Jake was visiting her office that day, and she showed him the communication. "Look at this. 5 years ago they told us we weren't good enough. Now they want to negotiate." Jake grinned. "What are you going to tell them?" Lisa was already composing her response. She kept it short and polite. "Earth appreciates the Council's interest, but we are no longer pursuing membership. We wish the Council well in their endeavors." The response sent shockwaves through Council leadership. They had expected humanity to jump at the chance. Young species always wanted Council approval. It was the ultimate validation. But humanity didn't want validation anymore. They had built something better, and they knew it. President Daniel Cruz had succeeded Helen Grant 2 years earlier. He was younger and more aggressive in his approach to galactic politics. He gave a speech that became famous across human space. "We do not ask permission to exist. We do not beg for the right to grow and explore. We do not apologize for being human. We offer friendship to all who approach us with respect. We offer nothing to those who demand we make ourselves smaller to fit their narrow vision of civilization." The speech was translated into hundreds of alien languages. Some species found it arrogant. Others found it inspiring. But no one could ignore it. Humanity had become impossible to dismiss. Jake Morrison took the Independence on a deep space exploration mission 6 months after Lisa declined the Council's offer. His orders were to map new systems beyond Council-controlled territory. What he found changed everything again. He discovered a group of 3 species living in a cluster of systems the Council had marked as off-limits. The Council claimed the region was dangerous and unstable. Jake found out the real reason. These 3 species had refused Council membership centuries ago. They had built their own cooperative society based on mutual benefit, rather than hierarchical control. The Council had quarantined them not because they were dangerous, but because they were an alternative example. They proved that species could thrive without Council oversight. The Council couldn't allow that idea to spread, so they had isolated these species and forbidden contact. Jake opened communications with them carefully. He explained who he was and where he came from. He told them about Earth and the Alliance. The 3 species listened with great interest. They called themselves the Free Worlds Coalition. Their leader was a being named Corvin, who belonged to a species called the Theris. Corvin spoke with Jake for hours, asking questions about humanity and the Alliance. "We have been isolated for 400 years, Corvin said. The Council told. To the galaxy, we were criminals and pirates. They said we rejected civilization. The truth is, we rejected their control. We wanted to live by our own values and make our own choices. The Council could not allow that." Jake understood completely. He invited Corvin to visit Earth and meet with Alliance leadership. The meeting between the Free Worlds Coalition and the Independent Systems Alliance happened 3 months later. Lisa hosted the gathering on Earth. Representatives from dozens of Alliance species met with the 3 species from the Coalition. What emerged from those talks was a formal merger. The Free Worlds Coalition joined the alliance, bringing their advanced technology and centuries of experience living, independent from Council control. The alliance now stretched across a huge region of space. It included over 60 species and controlled dozens of major trade routes. More importantly, it represented something the Council had never seen before. It was a genuine alternative to their system. Species could prosper without bowing to Council authority. They could maintain their own cultures and values. They could make their own choices about technology and exploration. They could be themselves without apology. Lisa stood at the window of her office looking out at the city below. Alien visitors walked the streets of Geneva freely. Kellen merchants traded with human businesses. Prath scientists worked in human laboratories. Theris artists displayed their work in human galleries. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely beautiful. This was what real cooperation looked like. Not forced cultural uniformity, but genuine diversity where differences were celebrated rather than suppressed. Jake visited her that evening. They had become close friends over the years. Both had been there at the beginning when humanity decided to stop seeking approval. Both had worked to build what came after. They sat in Lisa's office drinking coffee and watching the sunset. "We did something good," Jake said quietly. Lisa nodded. "We built something that matters. Not just for humans, for everyone who was tired of being told they weren't good enough." The Galactic Council sent another message a week later. This one was different. It wasn't an offer of membership. It was a demand. The Alliance was disrupting galactic stability. Species were leaving the Council to join an organization with no proper authority structure. This could not continue. The Alliance must disband or face consequences. President Cruz read the message during a cabinet meeting. He looked at Lisa and Jake, who were both present. "They want us to give up what we built because it threatens their control." Lisa met his eyes. "What are you going to do?" Cruz smiled. "I'm going to tell them no. And if they don't like it, they can do something about it. We won't start a fight, but we won't back down from one either." The response was sent that afternoon. It was short and clear. The Independent Systems Alliance is a free association of sovereign species. We recognize no authority's right to demand our dissolution. We seek peace with all, including the Galactic Council, but we will not surrender our independence. The message ended there. No threats, no ultimatums. Just a simple statement of fact. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The galaxy changed in the months following the battle. News of the Council's defeat spread faster than light itself. Every species heard the story. The mighty Galactic Council had brought 200 warships to crush humanity and the Independent Systems Alliance. Those warships had limped home damaged and humiliated without firing a single effective shot. The message was clear. The Council was not invincible. 3 Council member species withdrew their membership within the first month. They were medium-sized civilizations that had grown tired of Council bureaucracy years ago, but had been too afraid to leave. The battle proved that leaving was possible, that resistance was possible, that the Council could be challenged and defeated. 5 more species reduced their participation to minimal levels. They didn't fully withdraw, but they stopped attending Council sessions and stopped paying the taxes that funded Council. Operations. The Zethran High Arbiter who had denied humanity membership 6 years earlier was removed from his position. His replacement was younger and more practical. The first thing she did was send a message to Earth requesting formal peace negotiations. Not a demand. Not an ultimatum. A request. President Daniel Cruz read the message and smiled. "Progress," he said quietly. Lisa Brennan led the human delegation to the neutral station where negotiations took place. The Zethran representative met her with genuine respect. Her name was Kalara, and she bowed slightly when Lisa entered the room. "Ambassador Brennan, thank you for agreeing to meet." Lisa returned the bow. "We never wanted conflict. We just wanted to be left alone to build our own future." Kalara nodded. "I understand this now. The Council made mistakes. We treated you as children when you were already adults. We tried to force you into a mold you did not fit. This was wrong." The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. The resulting treaty was simple. The Galactic Council and the Independent Systems Alliance would maintain peaceful relations. Neither would interfere in the other's internal affairs. Trade would be conducted fairly between member species who wished to trade. Military vessels would respect each other's territory. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation, not force. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was peace. That was enough. More importantly, the treaty recognized the alliance as a legitimate governing body. The Council had spent years claiming the alliance was illegal or unauthorized. Now they formally acknowledged it as equal to themselves. That recognition meant everything. It meant the alliance wasn't some rebel movement. It was a genuine alternative to the Council system. Other Council species began reaching out to the alliance. Not to join necessarily, but to establish separate relationships. The Praith scientists who had been alliance members from the beginning helped facilitate these connections. They vouched for the alliance's integrity. They shared stories of how alliance membership had benefited their research and their people. Slowly, more species began to see the alliance not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Within 2 years, the political map of the galaxy was completely different. The Galactic Council still existed and still had significant influence, but it was no longer the only game in town. Species had options now. Some stayed loyal to the Council. Some joined the alliance. Some maintained relationships with both. A few species who had been isolated for centuries began emerging from their corners of space, curious about this new dynamic. The Council itself began to change. Internal pressure from member species forced reforms. The rigid hierarchy was loosened. The arbitrary requirements for membership were revised. The cultural mandates that demanded species change themselves to fit Council standards were abandoned. It wasn't a revolution, but it was evolution. The Council was adapting because it had to. The Alliance had proven there was another way. Jake Morrison retired from active military service 3 years after the battle. He was 42 years old and had spent half his life in uniform. He could have stayed. The military wanted him to, but he felt his work was done. He had helped protect humanity during its most vulnerable time. Now there were younger captains who could take over. He accepted a position teaching at Earth's Naval Academy. His students hung on every word as he taught them the principles that had won the battle. Think creatively, adapt constantly, never assume the enemy will do what you expect. Always respect your opponent but never fear them. Lisa continued as Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, but the job had changed. In the beginning, it had been about building the alliance from nothing. Now it was about managing a complex network of relationships between dozens of species. The alliance had grown to include over 90 member civilizations. Some were large and powerful. Most were small and independent. All of them valued the alliance's core principle, that no species was superior to any other. President Cruz served 2 full terms and then stepped down. His successor was a woman named Kate Palmer, who had been a colonial governor during the early days of alliance formation. She understood how important it was to maintain the values that made the alliance successful. Her first speech as president focused on that exact point. We built something beautiful here. We built a society where being different is celebrated, not punished. Where species can be themselves without apology. Where strength is used to protect, not dominate. We must never forget why we started this. We must never become what we opposed. Human colonies spread across dozens of star systems. Earth remained the center of human civilization, but it was no longer the only important human world. Mars had 3 billion people. The colonies around Proxima Centauri had populations in the hundreds of millions. Newer settlements were being established constantly. Humans were reaching out into the galaxy with confidence and purpose. They explored not because someone gave them permission, but because exploration was part of who they were. The Free Worlds Coalition integrated fully into the Alliance. Their centuries of experience living independent from the Council proved invaluable. They taught other species how to maintain sovereignty while cooperating on mutual challenges. They shared technology that the Council had tried to suppress. They showed by example that civilizations could thrive without centralized galactic authority. Trade within the Alliance flourished beyond anyone's projections. The Kellans, who had been the first to reach out to humanity, became wealthy. Their manufactured goods were in high demand across Alliance space. They opened factories on human worlds and hired human workers. Joint Kellan-human companies became major economic forces. It was messy and chaotic, and sometimes there were disputes. But it was real cooperation based on mutual benefit, not enforced compliance. Art and culture flowed freely between Alliance species. Human music became popular among the Praith. Kellan sculpture influenced human artists. Theris literature was translated into hundreds of languages. There were no council mandates about what was culturally appropriate. Species shared what they wanted to share and adopted what they wanted to adopt. Some humans loved alien food. Some aliens loved human sports. Some cultural exchanges failed completely. That was fine too. Real diversity meant accepting that not everything would appeal to everyone. Lisa stood in her office 5 years after the battle and reflected on everything that had happened. The woman who had once been desperate for council approval was now one of the most respected diplomats in the galaxy. She received messages from species across known space. Some wanted to join the alliance. Some wanted trade agreements. Some just wanted advice on how to stand up to powers that demanded their submission. She answered every message personally. Jake visited her that afternoon. They had maintained their friendship over the years. He looked relaxed in civilian clothes. "Teaching suits you," Lisa told him. He smiled. "It's good to pass on what we learned. My students understand something we had to learn the hard way. They understand that you don't need anyone's permission to be great. You just need the courage to be yourself and the strength to defend that choice." They walked through Geneva together, watching humans and aliens mix freely on the streets. Children played together regardless of species. Merchants haggled in multiple languages. Artists displayed work from a dozen different worlds. It wasn't perfect. There were still prejudices and misunderstandings. But it was genuine. It was real cooperation between equals, not forced harmony imposed from above. A young human officer approached Jake nervously. "Excuse me, sir." "Captain Morrison, I just wanted to say thank you. Your tactics won the battle that changed everything." Jake smiled kindly. "I appreciate that, but the tactics didn't change anything. The decision changed everything. The decision to stop asking permission. The decision to build our own future. The decision to say no to beings who demanded we make ourselves smaller. That decision was made before the first shot was fired. I just carried it out." The officer nodded slowly, understanding. Lisa watched the exchange and felt pride. That was humanity's real victory. Not the military triumph, though. That had been impressive. The real victory was changing how they saw themselves. For too long, humans had defined their worth by whether others approved of them. Now they defined their worth by their own standards. They were confident without being arrogant, strong without being cruel, independent without being isolated. President Palmer gave a speech on the 10th anniversary of humanity's withdrawal from council membership. She stood before representatives from all alliance species and many from outside it. 10 years ago, we made a choice. We chose dignity over acceptance. We chose freedom over security. We chose to be ourselves rather than what others wanted us to be. That choice led to this moment, to this alliance, to this community of equals. We didn't stop seeking approval because we were arrogant. We stopped seeking approval because we finally understood we didn't need it. We were always worthy. We just had to believe it ourselves. Lisa retired 2 years later. She was 58 years old and ready to rest. She moved to a colony world on the edge of Alliance space. She lived in a small house overlooking an ocean that reminded her of Earth. She wrote her memoirs carefully, documenting everything that had happened, not because she thought she was important, but because she wanted future generations to understand. To know that change was possible, that standing up to power was possible, that building something better was possible. Jake came to visit her in her retirement. They sat on her porch watching the alien sun set over alien waters. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, walking away from the council. Lisa shook her head. "Not for a second. Best decision humanity ever made." Jake nodded agreement. Then he asked another question. "Do you think we'll ever join the council, now that they've reformed, now that they're more reasonable?" Lisa thought about it for a long moment. "Maybe someday. If they ask nicely. If they approach us as equals. If they genuinely want partnership, rather than just adding us to their roster of members. But honestly, I hope we never do. I hope we maintain our independence. I hope we keep building the Alliance into something better than the Council ever was. Not because we hate them, but because we proved there's another way." A ship passed overhead carrying colonists to a new settlement further out. Lisa watched it go and smiled. That's us out there, still exploring, still building, still reaching for the stars. We don't do it because some council said we could. We do it because we're human, and being human means never stopping, never settling, never asking permission to become more than we were. Lieutenant Sophie Hayes took her ship, the Explorer, beyond the edge of map space 6 months later. She was 26 years old and commanded a crew of 30 humans and aliens. Her mission was pure exploration. No diplomatic agenda, no trade objectives, just the simple goal of seeing what was out there and reporting back. She carried no credentials from any council. She didn't need anyone's approval to explore. She was human, and that was authorization enough. As her ship jumped into unknown space, Sophie thought about all the people who had made this moment possible. The diplomats who had negotiated, the leaders who had decided, the soldiers who had fought, the citizens who had supported. All of them had played a part in creating a future where humans could reach for the stars without asking permission. She felt grateful to them and determined to honor their legacy. She would explore boldly and honestly. She would meet new species with respect and openness. She would show the galaxy that humanity at its best was something worth knowing. The galaxy was big and full of wonders. Humanity had only just begun to explore it. But they explored it on their own terms now, free and confident and unapologetically human. That was the real victory. That was what mattered. They had stopped seeking approval and started building something better. And the universe had learned to make room.